The morning sun shone bright and unashamed over the wide boulevard that split Golgotha down the middle. It also happened to be shining directly into Drake's eyes as he confidently strolled down the center of the busy boulevard. Slow-moving hovercraft interspersed with foot traffic, and the occasional wheel-based transport gave him a wide berth. Side eyes and looks of suspicion tossed by the ornately clad Geknosions and house slaves that ambled about. A flicker of movement caught his eye, and he whirled around, smacking a flung brick out of the air before it could hit him in the head. A group of Geknosian schoolchildren scrambled away as he regarded them with disappointment in his eyes. Shaking his head slowly, Drake continued walking towards the many, gaudy stone spires in the distance. Cassius was right behind him, the occasional light flicking of the back of his neck, an agreed-upon check-in method. As the two got closer to the castle, the scenery grew more and more lavish and gaudy. Stone buildings painted in bright, eye-catching colors, with servants in opulent robes and wearing expensive jewelry. But one thing remained the same. Dead-eyed humans swept the streets, wearing little more than thin white robes. Thin and sickly, they collected trash in a large, open-backed hover transport, while a Geknosian in golden plate armor watched over them, with a thinly padded metal club. He forced himself to look away as a man stumbled and fell, the guard raising the club with a shout. The sound of enraged screaming filled his head as he heard the dull thud of padded metal against flesh. He had to force his eyes closed as he trudged forward, fists clenching at his sides. A flick to the back of his neck made him look up at the castle wall that now loomed in front of him. It was then he noticed the blood dripping from his palms where his fingernails had dug into the flesh. With a deep breath to steady himself, he unclenched his fists and pulled his handkerchief from his back pocket to daub the blood off his palms. The massive, decorative wooden gates depicted a female Geknosian monarch, seated on a massive throne of bones and bodies. A massive curved sword leaned against a spinal column armrest. An inscription beneath it simply read, "Our Mother of Conquest." He stared up at the carving of the woman, feeling as though they were staring back. The carving's lips seemed to tweak up into a satisfied grin, as the massive gate swung out with a drawn-out squeal of wood and stone hinges. A Geknosian in a gaudy orange and purple ensemble bowed deeply, the bells on his hat jingling slightly. "Please follow me. The monarch and the general are waiting." Drake nodded. "Good. Take me to them." The jester swept up from the bow and stepped to the side, bowing again while gesturing him forward. Drake felt a flick against his neck and proceeded forward. Drake confidently grabbed the padded chair that had been placed for him and pulled it away, ignoring the look of indignation from the monarch as he swapped it out for a nearby ornately carved, plain wooden chair, before sitting down and placing his elbows on the tablecloth as he folded his fingers together under his chin. The monarch was fat and round, scales drooping with age and weight. He wore a tall, golden crown stuffed with purple gems, his bloated torso swaddled in a gold-studded purple robe. He wore a smile on his face, one that never reached his eyes. However, the one that really caught his attention was the muscular, scarred Geknosian at his side. They wore a suit not unlike Drake's, but his was the colors of purple and gold. A long, curved scimitar leaned against the table at his side, in easy reach of a clawed cybernetic arm. This one also wore a smile, one that indeed reached his eyes. But it was not a warm smile. It was the cold, calculating, and malevolent smile of battle junkie. The silence weighed heavily in the air as a human servant glided over with a teapot. Not one of the three dared speak as the human slave poured the monarch and the general a blood-red brew. When he went to pour Drake's, he flinched a bit when Drake grabbed his wrist, before taking the teapot away and pouring his own. Set it in the center of the white tablecloth, right next to the three-tiered silver tray of colorful baked sweets. Looking up at the nervous servant, Drake gave him a soft smile and stated, "You're free to leave. If they want something, they can have a Geknosian bring it." The servant looked up at the monarch, who seemed to be boiling with rage. The monarch opened their mouth to shout, but the general next to him simply patted the monarch on the shoulder before saying, "And tell Monarch he's on serving duty now. You have the day off. The servant nodded rapidly and bowed before backing away. The general then fixed his gaze on Drake. You know, as a guest, it's rude to decline being served. Drake stared back, not blinking. And? The general chuckled softly, dropping a few white cubes into his tea and stirring before speaking. I shouldn't have expected any less from the scarred demon. Drake snorted. Is that really what you're going to call me? A little extravagant for one of my heritage. The general smiled and took a courteous sip of tea that revealed a metal jaw and teeth. I feel it fits perfectly. After all, you did manage to kill my younger brothers. No small feat, I might add. Drake's expression darkened, and he leaned forward a bit, picking up his tea and slurping it off loudly. Is that so? Then you must be General Gomon. Gomon smiled wickedly and spread his mechanical arms wide. I hope I live up to your expectations. Drake grunted, looking him up and down. I expected you to be taller and less creepy. Gomon's eye twitched and he brought his arms back in, smile plastered to his face. Drake let a little smirk slip onto his face. He had gotten under the general's skin. Gomon cleared his throat and changed the subject, turning to the monarch who'd been watching the banter with an amused smile. Anyway, we're gathered here to discuss a peaceful resolution to our current predicament, Your Majesty. Would you like to present the formal terms of surrender? The monarch smiled graciously and produced a rolled-up piece of parchment that he rolled out onto the table, weighing the corners down with rose-colored square pastries. Drake's blood began to boil as the monarch began speaking in a haughty, holier-than-thou tone. According to ancient Geknosion law, they who wish to surrender hereby relinquish all property, capital, and life to the Geknosion Empire. The leader of the surrendering force must present themselves to the victors with bent knee, and relinquish their weapon with open palms. No harm will come to those surrendering or their people, so long as this contract remains upheld. The monarch stopped speaking and regarded Drake with a look of superiority. Drake pursed his lips and looked down at the contract with disdain, before glancing up at the monarch. Well, he softly stated, why aren't you kneeling? And took a long drink of tea. He could have cut the tension in the air with a knife as the monarch and Gomon stared daggers at him. Gomon quietly cleared his throat. I think you misunderstand. Drake slammed his fist against the table, staring Gomon in his twitching eye before speaking. I understand perfectly. He stood and quietly pushed his chair in. The only way this ends peacefully is if you give my people their freedom. I don't care what you do after that. But until then... Drake turned and began walking away. I'm not going to stop fighting. If I'm going to die, I'm going to die a free man. Drake took a couple of steps and paused, looking back at the stunned lizards, specifically the fuming Gomon. I want you to know, Goom may have been my enemy, but even I wouldn't shove him into a living grave. Your own goddamn brother! Drake took another step, and he was suddenly surrounded by the razor-sharp points of 5 spears, held by power-armored mercs as Gomon chuckled darkly. If you won't surrender, then I guess we'll have to settle for cutting off the serpent's head. See how long your little rebellion lasts without you. Drake heaved a deep sigh, reaching into the breast of his suit as he spoke. I knew something like this would happen. Drake glanced back at Gomon, grinning as something distorted the air around the balcony above the guards. Unfortunately for you, I didn't come alone. A massive ornamental flower pot fell from above, crushing a guard beneath its bulk as it shattered. Drake didn't hesitate, drawing his gun and firing it point blank into a guard's helmet. They staggered and fell back, faceplate dented as Drake drew his sword with one hand and decapitated another. 2 more shots sent the rest stumbling back as Drake turned the gun on Gomon, eyes ablaze with hatred and anger as he pulled the trigger twice and sprinted for the gate. Cassius close behind as the 2 sprinted away. Gomon fell backwards in his chair, blood and oil splattering from his face as the monarch shouted for more guards. But after only a few words, a clawed metal hand stopped the monarch, who looked back in disbelief at Gomon. The general grinned madly, face torn open to reveal a mostly metal skull, the general's left eye socket empty and bleeding.
Let him go. But he just...
Gomon threateningly looked down at the monarch, blood oozing from his eye socket.
Let him go. Good enemies are hard to find after all, especially ones his age.
Gomon watched the human boy leap over a guard, before bursting through the smaller door set into the main gate. Gomon softly reached up and pinched off a small tube that squirted oil near his ear, licking the blood off his lips and savoring its salty flavor.
May we meet again soon, scarred demon.